All right. We are going ahead with the live show here. I'm going to get myself set up for success. Hello, anyone watching now or later? I just got a notification to watch the Olympics live. Not now. I'm a little busy. All right. Let me find my page here. I've got one or two places I'd like to read from for today. Go ahead and get this out of the way. Welcome to week 2 of Death in the Silent Places. Bam. There we go. Nailed it this time. Excellent chapters. A little different. Definitely a little different in style than the first 2 chapters. Next week, we will, of course, do one chapter, chapter 5. In the next 3 weeks, 5, 6, and 7 will all be kind of a reduced amount. So if you're reading anything else, be sure to let us know on the comment of this video or on one of the posts on the app, and I'd be interested to see what anybody else is reading at this time. So I've got a couple different books going. I am right now going through Patient Heal Thyself. Try to nail this. Reading that about health of all kinds and diet, nutrition, things like that. Going through Why We Get Sick. That's with one of my other book clubs. And then I'm going through a book on digital, what am I trying to say? Like arguments for and against Facebook, Google, Apple, technology in general, how we learn and how generations are different, kind of the neuroplasticity and different generations that grew up with technology and without. So anyway, not that those are entirely related, but that is what I'm going through right now. So I'll go ahead and jump in. These, like I said, were very different. I think what they show really together kind of follows, again, what the first 2 gentlemen, C.H. Stigand and trying to remember all these names here, got my notes, and J.H. Patterson, were that these guys were pretty well-rounded individuals. And I think that speaks to their effectiveness in battle, because, of course, Major P.J. Pretorius was actually fighting actively in a war. I don't think any of the other 3 were, even though I think they all served or were hunters in some way or had some connection to the military. But this guy actually was fighting in a war. So also, if I seem a little lethargic, I had a pretty big dinner, so I'm very happy with that, but I'm very relaxed and a little full. So I apologize if I'm a little low energy. But and I also had a little ice cream, treated myself to that. So but yeah, they definitely were more well-rounded individuals. Again, speaking multiple languages, also having plenty of skills outside of their just like hunting and army. What am I trying to say? Acumen, just being able to be good with a weapon, especially the major, who was able to help them locate a ship and navigate the swamps, but then also measure when the boat would be able to come in and out of the bay or whatever that area was, the part of that river. So just a really fascinating set of skills on some of these guys. I will say, too, if you've ever read The Art of War, this book I read a few months ago, even though it's pretty short, it's quite fascinating. The idea of knowing your enemy, knowing yourself, knowing your enemy, know the terrain, and know the weapon are, kind of the 4 big things that you can take away from that segment of the book. But these guys knew their enemy. The Major Pretorius, of course, knew who he was fighting, and knew the language of surrounding tribes. He also knew about the cannibals and things like that. Was surprised a few times, but also kind of learned how to escape those and not get eaten or killed. And then, of course, Sasha Simel knew that the jaguar that he was fighting was Assassino was going to be quite a tough, formidable opponent. So, but he knew at some point that it's kind of funny the way the story takes a turn, that he, spoiler alert, was never going to try and go after it because he didn't want to lose his dogs. He didn't want to die in that fight, and he would hunt some of the others, but never try to get on the track of that one. So, because he knew what it would cost him. But I'll go ahead and jump into the chapters. With chapter 3, Major P.J. Pretorius, was quite interesting shift, kind of like I mentioned at the beginning. The target here was other men and a battleship. which of course in the nature of war, that's what you're going up against. But he did have some run-ins with big game and other things like that. But um, for chapter 3, it was quite a fascinating shift and a new take from going from these leopards and these man killers and the man eaters of Tsavo. And of course, with chapter 4, you've got the jaguars. But it kind of reminded me of the Most Dangerous Game, of course, hunting people. Different twist, obviously, more of a real life experience in war. And but it shows that the formidable opponent can often not just be a beast or just man. You fight both sometimes in the same day. So pretty interesting there. But it also kind of, as he fought through the war and the nature around him, one of my biggest takeaways from this was the tenacity of a wounded individual, someone that has been hurt by other people. Has this sort of like driving force, if they choose to kind of follow that, that is just incredibly dangerous and wild and powerful. Obviously, not a lot of people are like that today. Not a lot of people have the ability to just kind of go out and pursue an entire nation's army like that, or to pursue big wild game. But it is kind of interesting to see in day-to-day life how getting burned by somebody can really drive your emotions for a little bit if you let it, and it can factor into how you treat people for the rest of the day, but also how you look at them for the rest of your life. Especially if it's like a big burn, if someone wrongs you in a big way, it can really change your relationship with them, and but it also can stick with you and kind of formulate this desire to never be burned like that again, or to be proactive. In his case, obviously, he was proactive in like, I'm going to destroy the entire German army as much as I can. Being jailed for a little bit and having his land taken and things like that. So he went through tons of stuff at the hands of the Germans and even the British, and clearly was driven to destroy the people, even though they weren't exactly those people. Wanted to destroy them for that. And it kind of reminded me too of, you can kind of go two ways with it, really. You can go the Incredibles route, where what's his name? Is it Buddy? I think it was Buddy, but he goes and becomes the Syndrome, and he has that moment where he finally meets Mr. Incredible after a while, and is like, I'm just like you, but now I'm better. And his is all like the augmented technology. It's not like an actual superpower, but he's got this sort of fake superhero-ness to him, but it's also his distorted mindset. It's the way that he views life and the way that he's actually going after people, and the good that he thinks he's doing, or the bad. But the Count of Monte Cristo, of course, his motivation was, I'm assuming, eventually to kill the forgetting his name, but but he becomes a much better man. He escapes. He cleans up his lifestyle, becomes this sort of rich gentleman, and finds somebody. But I think eventually his goal is to use all of that and drive him towards defeating his enemy. But it's also, and I believe, if I'm remembering the story correctly, like the woman that he meets kind of shows him that the enemy's kind of within himself in a way, and he has to sort of look at that and like let that die. So his identity was the man he was before, and then his identity is the prisoner, and then his identity after that is conquering that and using that to get to where he's going. And then he almost just like has to kill it off and say, you know what, this is not who I'm supposed to be. All this work, all this effort, this whole thing driving me forward is not supposed to be that. Maybe I need to reread or rewatch that movie, but I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. But with the proper motivations, what can we accomplish? And sometimes you don't have to be hurt by somebody, even though those are very visceral reactions to pretty tough moments. Those can drive you. And I wonder if there's a way to channel that energy into positive endeavors. A lot of people, I've talked to, with friends and things like that after high school, and you hear people talk about like, oh, I'm going to be X, Y, and Z for the reunion, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Can you imagine what I'm going to be, or I'm going to strive to show people? And it's like, dude, they haven't thought about you in 10 years. Here you are, 10 years of your life. I'm going to show them. I'm going to stick it to them. And it's like it is a powerful motivator, but then it's almost like a hollow reward at the end. You finally get your business, you finally get that dream body or that whatever, and then you show up and you're like, yeah, look, everybody, and they're all like, well, good for you, man. Hey, you look great, or whatever. You don't. Was it really worth it? Those 10 years of building this idea of I'm going to stick it to them. Does it really give you the satisfaction and the spiritual fulfillment that you thought it was going to? And I think anybody that truly answers that question is no. And obviously here, he kind of spends most of the rest of his time just like on the unending struggle of defeating the Germans and sticking it to them and capturing them or killing them or whatever. And I guess that's a little bit of an easier situation when the enemy is always in front of you. Like, for example, like a high school bully or something like that he's never really in front of you again until you see them at the reunion or whatever it is. But here, as he's fighting the Germans, they're always in front of him until he like takes that ship down. And that's kind of his big moment. But there are obviously other things, and then it eventually goes away, but he does have plenty of time to kind of exact his revenge on them. But it's also quite wild, the power of pain and adrenaline. I love that part where he gets shot in the leg, and it says like in his mind, he totally forgoes all care and just throws everything out the window, all caution of the crocodiles that are in the river that he jumps into. He's like, I know that typically, you would not hop into a murky river, especially at night where you can't see anything. But in this moment, the threat behind me and across from me is much greater than what's directly in front of me. And I found that pretty powerful. I mean, he jumps in, and of course you got to think too, he's been shot in the leg and, he's all torn up. And I wonder too about, the pathogens, bacteria and algae and things like that. I mean, even the minnows are like eating at the raw open wound. And, but like the pain was there. And then of course the adrenaline was driving him through that, but just forcing him to say, okay, the danger in front of me is now what would typically be at the height of my concern is no longer there. It's much less than what's behind me. And I think some people are driven by fear of failure in that way. In a lot of ways, they're driven by, kind of like I was saying earlier, with that negative thing behind them. And this was really kind of more, book was more of a mindset shifter for me reading it than books like on habits or on business development, in a way, because I'm seeing like a very visceral account of someone with the danger of failing or the danger of staying in one place. They clearly had a high motivator for surviving. I mean, all of these guys in this book so far, obviously they're being faced with death on a daily account, but it's kind of interesting to see when you have a motivator that is strong enough, what you can accomplish and what you can put aside, the amount of pain or the amount of constraints or concerns that you can put behind you and say, you know what, survival is the key at all costs, even at the potential expense. Like he could have been eaten by a crocodile, but he knew, I have a better chance, even slightly sliver, of the beasts in this water that I can't see versus the beasts outside of it that are shooting. But like I said, that was just such a, as I read through it and kind of ruminated on it, I'm like, we read all these books on motivation and business and self-development and all this stuff. And then I'm like, here it is in real life. Like, here's the moment when you have to go past the book. You have to go past the self-improvement. You have to go past these motivators of, yeah, build a side hustle. Like, if you don't do, and you're not motivated properly, if you don't do the right thing for the right reason, you will stay there. You will stay on the shore, and you will eventually get shot by that whatever that is, whether it's dying of old age and not accomplishing what you wanted, or whatever. You didn't go and live the life that you wanted to, and eventually it did swallow you because you were not pursuing what you knew needed to be done in order to survive. yeah, I don't know if that entirely made sense, but it just kind of made me think about, the books I read, maybe one a month on development and things like that. And it's kind of like, yeah, I should be motivated. Well, here's this guy. He really was motivated to survive. Um, I thought what was great too, we talked about how he developed that sixth sense. Um, really didn't have too much to say on that, except it goes to show like when you are in tune with your gut and you are really in tune with your surroundings and you have taken in all of your you've taken in the entire situation and all of your history and all of your experience, you really do embody that, and you like you're living through that all the time. That sixth sense is something you have to trust. Whether you're spiritually connected or talk to some um, older gentleman on kind of the gut feeling of their wife. Sometimes you just have to trust that, and I think a lot of people, especially in kind of the manosphere thing, are like, I don't listen to my wife at all. And you kind of have to listen to that. Sometimes those concerns are very valid because they come from some place of like, man, I feel it, like you don't understand what I'm saying, but you just got to trust me. Like I got to go through with that. So I think that's really powerful when you really are in tune with yourself and you really do get it. That can make kind of all the difference. And it did here. It saved his life. He just trusted that gut feeling and got out of there. It's crazy to me too, as he ends up talks about here on 114. Got a couple different passages here, and really just kind of sums up just the entirety of this story here. But I was kind of laughing. Later, he was a pioneer in filmmaking. This is on 114. Later, he was a pioneer in filmmaking to record the charges of dangerous game, particularly lions, which he killed mere feet in front of the camera's lens. That's a ballsy dude. I mean, that takes planning and effort, skill, precision. I mean, that takes, especially with the technology then, you got to think right now, it's not like you could set up a camera like this or even a better one, honestly, and get hours of footage, Just had to set something up and plan it and set a trap and kill a freaking lion in front of the camera. So, unless of course he took somebody with him, but that was pretty wild. I mean, that is ballsy. So, and of course it takes skill and you have to be tactile and good at those instruments. But here's really what really was my second biggest takeaway here, and it's the end of the chapter at 114. It's been a long time since that 16-year-old boy began riding transport during the Matabele War, and very little is left of the rusting carcass of the Königsberg in her watery jungle grave on the Rufiji. But the spirit of Pretorius and the other good ones in capital is still out there, alive in every blue-tongued lick of a lonely campfire, enshrined in the distant trumpet of a big tusker or the grunt of a dark-maned lion in the night. Don't take my word for it. Go out into the still wild places of Africa and listen. Watch. He's there. He's there, all right. But if you happen onto Pretorius's shade in person, do me a favor, will you? Ask him what the hell PJ stood for. But I thought that was beautiful. And I just wanted to think, like, really, no matter where you go, and it's a little tougher now with as industrialized and suburbanized as we are, but when you go into these wild places, or even when you go into like the big cities, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, whatever, just remember who was there before you, especially in these things like Africa. Can you imagine going out and standing in any remote area of these parts of Africa and just being like, wow, these men stood here. They fought these wars. They hunted this big game. They faced death. I could potentially be standing right where some of that happened. Not even just these men, but you got to think even the native tribes that live there and the things that they're going through on a daily basis or anything like that. The amount of people that are facing death or were facing death right where you were standing, right where you are standing is it's a powerful thought. And it just kind of made me think about all the people that have come before us and the people that will come after us. Will we leave that same sense of awe in the people that come after us? Or is it just like existence? And a lot of life is, in a way, I mean, there's a reason these stories are compiled into a book is because they are, in some ways, supernatural, but they are extraordinary tales. And there's a reason that they're written here. And I think a lot of people nowadays live very mundane lives and still write about them, and that's in this digital book about whatever the digital world. It's talks about how much space is dedicated to the average blogger, and something like hundreds of thousands of blogs are written every day, and just how much energy that takes up. And the idea was that we would see the best of humanity compiled in these web pages. But it talks about how the shift has become so much more of the personal, like, here's my life, here's what I'm dealing with, here's how I'm feeling. I have to put it somewhere. And they treat it more as a diary rather than a collection of extraordinary works. And so it's fascinating to think that sometimes that may be all we leave, because life can be mundane, and it can just be survival, depending on your situation. But you can live an extraordinary life in the simplicity. You can overcome struggles and hardships. And it does make me wonder, people look now at their grandparents of the Great Depression or whatever it is, and they say, they were a survivor, they were a go-getter, they were a doer, they were, they went through starvation and economic collapse, and they, never wore shoes, and this, whatever it was, and, and they survived and they made it happen. Those are admirable stories. And the human body is very powerful. The human mind is incredibly powerful. That desire, that instinct to survive is so strong, and it can withstand a whole lot. Starvation, goes through here about how many times he went hungry, how many days he trekked with infections and wounds and all kinds of stuff while being hungry, and I think that's incredibly powerful. Like, you can go out in certain fields and just soak up the energy of the families that have farmed those fields for generations. Like, as simple as it is, the energy of that, of people getting up at like 3 and 4 a.m. just to survive, and going to bed, at like 9, 10, 11 p.m., doing these 18-hour days, and also giving us food. That's something I've just been listening to, is like these local stories, or stories of local farmers and things like that, and or small farmers and big farmers and commercial farmers, and just the battle a lot of it is, and they barely break even, or they barely, make ends meet, and how tough that stuff can be, and how unrewarding sometimes it can be, but how just how, I don't know, how monumental that struggle can be. It's just so powerful to me. And thinking about, again, like I said, even just going out, as you go into a local state park, or you go into the Grand Canyon, or Yosemite, or Yellowstone, or the Amazon, or wherever, and you just think about the generations and the thousands of people that have been there before you, some of them sightseeing, some of them surviving. It's a wild thought to think about who literally created the path in front of you. It could have been park rangers, could have been people that are helping stop erosion and finding the best path, could have been people that trekked that every single day, to find food or to find water or whatever it was. So I guess it's just a call to kind of remember our ancestors and people that went before us. It's when you really like sit and think about it, you're like, wow, who built this? Who came before me? It's powerful stuff. I think that's really about it for that chapter. Yeah, 114 was a great summary to the end of that. And he does a really good job of finishing off these chapters. But 114 was just really powerful, just thinking about the lonely campfire, thinking about a big tusker or the grunt of a dark-maned lion in the night. Go out into the still wild places of Africa and listen, and talking about how his spirit is out there. It's powerful stuff. So chapter 4, yes, like I said at the beginning, the knowing your enemy with Sasha Simon here. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing all these names correctly. A lot of them are African, and this one I think is actually South American. It really reminded me, the story here, of both Ryan Holiday's take on the obstacle is the way, and of course, which is founded on the Stoic idea behind Marcus Aurelius, that the obstacle is everything, and it really can define you, which is a powerful thought. Whether that's health issues, whether that's family issues, whether that's death or struggle or injury or financial hardship, those things do, in a way, seriously define you. Like I was saying earlier, with people that venerate their grandparents that lived through certain hard times. That's what they go to, right? Look at how tough they were because X, they went through Y experience. Sometimes it is about the good-hearted nature of somebody or their charity or whatever, but sometimes that's what we grip and we hold on to. We say, this is how much grit that person had, how much strength because they came with X. Not just like, oh, he lifted weights. That's something is like, oh, my grandfather used to be jacked. Well, part of the reason why he was jacked is because the war, because of his, legendary sports background or whatever it was. He was a fighter. He talks about in one of these books how one of these stories how one of these guys was just absolutely jacked and just a steel rod of a human being because he had trained for that, and nobody would fight this guy because he would just absolutely clobber them. And he had to be that tough. He had to be hard like that. But we love stuff like that. There's sort of a heroism to that, and it's all based on that obstacle. Is why did you overcome? Why did you push through or crack open the boulder like in the story? Why did you go through that? Survival, number one. Number two, because you had to. But it really does kind of define you as you in your legacy, as people remember you. And what's crazy too is when I talked about this, has a lone kill. Like he is alone when he kills that jaguar. And it really speaks to the power of death as well as the obstacle. That life is weirdly defined by these hardships and also by death or near-death experiences. And it's wild to think that it could be totally made up. But that assassino, yeah, that jaguar was like well known in that area. It was well known by hunters. People had tried to kill it and failed. He was not going to and was eventually faced with that. But it had been known to kill cattle and dogs and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was well known. Same as the man eaters from the other chapters. But killing that was so powerful because it changed the landscape of that entire area of South America. Pretty sure it was. Yeah, Brazil, things like that. Yeah. It changed the landscape because that's how much of a formidable force that jaguar was and how much death it took with it and the amount of pain that it caused people. When Sasha kills that, it's like the spirits are just lifted. It's like the torment is no longer there, but at the same time, it's the death of that creature that lends all of the credence to the man that Sasha is. Like he does have all these other hunting stories and being a jaguar hunter and a poacher and controlling the wild game and things like that. But this is the big one. And what's crazy is it all hinges on a moment where he could have just died and never been found and never been heard of, and really the one thing that all of it hinges on, like he could have just gone and told people the story, right? And published a book about it or whatever. But he takes that skull with him. Like it's already the animal, eventually death overtakes it. And then life really springs from it as flies and maggots and larvae and things like that are eating the dead flesh of that kill. Something that was so, in a way, it was like feared, but also revered and respected for just the absolute machine of death that it was. Kind of the merchant, just all across the land there, just taking everything with it. And then it dies and life just comes right out of it. But he's gone for a few days and comes back. And I hope I'm not spoiling this for anybody, by the way, but if you're here, you probably read it by now. But there's life in that. And then he, of course, takes the skull with him. And that's like his trophy. That is his icon of death. That's like, I did do this. This is that skull. And then, of course, like I said, once the entire atmosphere, the environment totally changes when that beast is no longer there to torture and torment all those farmers and livestock and people and towns, hunters and stuff. So the weight of that is felt and it's carried in that icon, which I thought was just kind of wild. That the power of a trophy. I mean, you got to think that the Olympics are going on and whatnot, and it's a manufactured piece of metal. And I think they talk about, it only costs however many dollars to make that out of really the amount of effort that goes into winning the gold medal and the cheapness of the metal itself is such a stark contrast. And I would say it's all kind of in this as well. Like all he takes with him is a skull, but there's so much energy and power and reverence in that skull And that goes with the story, and same thing for all those Olympians. How many people don't make it and they train just as hard or not hard enough, obviously, if they, or that one unlucky moment or the one malfunction or whatever it was, not being on their game, and you have to take the trophy with you, no matter how cheap it is, no matter how hollow it is, no matter how useless, like the skull now is not even holding the brain and the eyes and moving that jet. It's the trophy. But anyway, I'm putting a lot of emphasis on that. But I think too, the obstacle of the whole thing can be shown kind of in your daily life. I was a rock climber for a few years, and I really would love to get back into that, because part of it is the struggle and the training, and the same thing with like weightlifting or any other sport, really. But with rock climbing, you can really see your progress as you look on a wall and you got your V0s, or I forget how, there are a lot of different categorizations, but you got like a V0 to a V8 for bouldering, or a V5 to V15, or whatever, V16 even for roped stuff. But you can visually see your progress. The colors change, the numbers change, and there's respect that comes with hitting those certain numbers. You can be the best climber in the room, you still got to warm up, right? You still got to get on your zeros and your ones and your twos and whatever. And then when you really start to hit those V6, that V5 is really where people start to realize you've been climbing for a little while. Like, this takes technique, this takes skill, or really powerful brute strength in order to accomplish whatever the technique or the move or whatever it is. But typically that V5 and higher is a lot of technique. It's a lot of training and paying attention to the minute details, like doing the yoga, doing the stretching and getting the flexibility, but also the minute strength in calves, in knees, and tendons and elbows and things like that. The technique in the fingers and just being able to adjust to the situation. But anyway, it's more about, you can look at the entire wall of obstacles and see the path in front of you. Not only can you see the route that you're going to do, but you can also see, I want to get to those 8s, but I have to go through 7 and 6 and 5 and 4. And I have to master a certain level of skills before I can get there. But it really speaks to how sometimes when you're climbing, and I'm not going to try and stay on this forever, but you have to stretch your abilities, especially if you're going to do bouldering outside or you're going to climb outdoors. Like, there are sort of like predetermined routes, but someone had to kind of navigate that and then set it. And that's kind of the, but indoors they set it with certain rocks, as a predetermined path. But, and you can go so far as to kind of be the Alex Honnold, where you just say, you know what, I've climbed this route so many times. I've practiced so much. I'm at the top of my game. I have to stretch. Otherwise, I'm not complete. I have to stretch and I have to do the next thing. And typically, when you get to that level, when you become the elite and that percent of the percent of the percent at the top of the game, you kind of have to put life on the line. You have to put everything on the line and say, you know what? I'm staking my reputation on this. I'm staking my life on this. My family, everything ahead of me, my future hinges on this moment. And if you haven't seen It's Free Solo, I think, is a powerful documentary on Alex Honnold doing the climbing. But same here, like, he takes this woman, Sasha takes this woman to go find her husband, and like they find him and he's dead as a doornail, and she of course can't handle it. But, it's like talks about how he could have just as well been one of those, deaths in the long grass and just somebody else's food, buzzer food, but he, in that moment when he's faced with life and death and his dog has been killed, it's kind of like, I'm here now. I have to put this on the line. I can turn away and I can run from this, or I could just face it, and I'm in the moment and I'm going to do it. So I think sometimes that's how you have to approach a lot of things in life, is just, I can't do that, or I can't be that, or whatever it is. And really just going at it and saying, you know what, this is what has to be done. This is what has to be done. This is what makes a man. This is what makes me, and again, it kind of ties back to that obstacle, but like, this is how I'm defined. This is who I am. And sometimes you got to face your fears, and sometimes it's as simple as finishing your to-do list for the freaking day, but those moments are not, those don't really, those are the building block, but those are not what get into books. Those are not what people remember, is like, oh yeah, he did all of his to-do lists. No, the moments are like, yeah, like his family survived because of him or her or whatever it is doing that. It was crazy too. I mentioned his dog's dying. Like there are necessary sacrifices that you have to make along the way, and I think that was really shown in this chapter 4 story is the amount of sacrifices made, and really you have to keep moving. You cannot stop, especially when there's something like life on the line or survival or whatever it is. You're building your business. Like there are necessary sacrifices, there are obstacles you're going to hit, and there are things that you're going to have to say, you know what, that's got to go. And or something that may go and you're going to say, you know what, I got to keep moving. I got to deal with that. So I think that's really just part of his story overall, and just saying, you know what, here are these obstacles, here are these experiences, here are these things, but like I'm moving in one direction, man. I'm surviving. I am going to be this man. And of course, he didn't even set out to be the man that killed Assassino. He set out to be the man to just like hunt these things and avoid that, and was faced with that choice eventually. And when it came down to it, he faced it, and there were necessary sacrifices made. And even, his beloved dogs and the one he steps on, you have to, sometimes you kind of have to push the envelope a little bit. And he finds that potentially the best way to lure out his struggle was to cause pain for something else, which is kind of crazy. I'm not saying we have to hurt people in our lives, but sometimes what you do will offend people. It will hurt people. It will ostracize you, and it will push people away. And you kind of just have to do it because you're following your gut. You're following whatever you're spiritually called to do, and you're following kind of your destiny in a way. And you're just like, you know what? I know this isn't going to make a lot of people happy, but it's got to be done, And I'm not saying that you need to physically hurt people to get what you want, but I think there are times in your life where you see it and you know it, and you're like, you know what? Just got to do this, man. Just got to keep moving. Yeah, I wanted to read 121 and I think 131 as well. Really big moment. One of these all-encompassing moments here, and I'll wrap it up soon, but it's on page 121. The point of big game hunting is not just a matter of killing something that can bite back, but of how it is done and how much risk to which the hunter purposely exposes himself. It all comes down to that timeless moment between slamming heartbeats when you know for an absolute certainty that if you lose your nerve or blow the shot, you are going to die. Dead, as in forever. No more pungent amber scotch, no more sea breezes over the malachite flats, no more charcoal crusty, slab-sided steaks, no more mysterious girl aroma in the twilight. Not even any more taxes once the IRS finishes mauling your bedraggled carcass for the last gold inlay. Like most things in life, you only get out of an experience what you put into it. There is no emotional free lunch either. And I just love the way he's put that. And he's kind of put everything in life in that. The kind of the pleasures of life with women and drinks, but also like simple things like a steak, a well-done steak. Simple things with nature, sitting there and soaking up the sea breeze over a very specific environment, the Malachite Flats. And also the pains in life, like the IRS, is kind of his joke, the death and taxes. Like you will die, and that'll be one inevitability, but you won't get to death without the IRS raking you over the coals first. But it all comes down to that timeless moment between slamming heartbeats when you know you're in for absolute certainty that if you lose your nerve or blow the shot, you are going to die. And I think that's a really big thing. Of course, part of the reason why I'm here and doing what I'm doing right now, and looking forward to doing what I'm doing in the future, is just watching a lot of the Owen Benjamin streams where he was like, okay, I just have to disconnect from the system. Like I have to go grow my own food. And there is so much weight placed on growing your own food and surviving. And it's not even just that season, it's to make it through the winter. That's what's crazy to me. That's one of my biggest fears right now, is just like, how do you make it through the winter on your own soil? To me, that's huge. To a lot of people for generations, that was just what you did. Now it's like, would we survive the winter? So I'm trying to grow some carrots right now that I can try and overwinter in some little baskets, maybe like 10-gallon baskets. And I'm curious to see how that does, because I'd like to just move them under a roof so they don't get snowed on. But I'm trying that in like baby steps, and it takes baby steps to get through some of this. It's just very difficult to plan out a whole field and be like, all right, this is going to get us through the winter. It's our first one. Just baby steps and learning it. And Dave and I have talked about that before. Like, you just can't do everything at once. There's too much to learn. There's too much to practice. But for some people, this was a way of life. Surviving the winter was a way of life. Pulling food out of the soil was just how you survive, or getting it from animals, hunting it and facing death was how you did that. Um, but there are those moments where it's like, if I don't do this, I'm a dead man. If I don't grow this food, I'm a dead man. Build this business, whatever it is. There are those moments that if you don't do that thing, you're a goner. And then maybe you don't even get a book written about you. Maybe you get a really crappy eulogy written about you. Maybe, whatever. But yeah, I do think death just reveals the beauty of life. There's a doctor I've been listening to about the gut microbiome and soil health and stuff. His name is Zach Bush. And he talks about how in the ICU, what he would do is help bring people back to life. And he said one of the biggest things, one of the most common phrase that he heard immediately was, "Why did you bring me back?" And because these people had gone on and they'd seen the light and they'd wanted to be there, they'd wanted to go into this place where they were totally accepted and loved and whole and filled with energy and light. And then they get brought back here and they're on a machine and they've got tubes and they've got needles and they got people and masks and this and that. And they're like, I'm in hell now. I'm in hell. I was almost there and now I'm in hell. And yeah, he talks about how their first question is, why did you bring me back? And I think there's a lesson in that. And with this, where, we call both of them like near-death experiences. And really one of them is pre-death and one is post-death. In those moments in the ICU, those people, they have clinically been dead. The people say like he died for 4 minutes or he was out for 7 minutes or whatever it is, pronounced, and then they come back. But here, like these moments are created pre-death. And those are the moments that make you really appreciate life. I think that also kind of leads into that stoic idea of like, you need to look at life that way, as if every day could be your last. And it's really kind of a mantra people say anyway, but from the stoic idea and from people like Ryan Holiday, it's this idea that like when you go to bed, you need to assess the day and say, did I live today to the fullest? Did I make everything happen that should have happened? Am I truly fulfilled? And if I died tonight, would I be happy with the way this day went? What can I do to change that? And really, if you're assessing it hopefully properly and you're living that mindset, you're going to bed being like, I did a good job. I did. Even if you were working 8, 10, 12, 18 hours a day, you did a good job today. And like, you know what? If that's my legacy, that's fine. Do whatever I did today. But I did well at it and then use my spare time appropriately. But then the beauty is that when you go to bed like that, thinking that was your last day, let's say you were given 100 days. When you wake up tomorrow on your 101st day, it's kind of like, what am I going to do today? Now that I've done everything I needed to, or I did such a good job yesterday, what am I going to do with this new day? And I think that mindset and this, having these, not that we're all going to have these experiences in life, having them before you die or before you're an invalid or before you're, a vegetable or whatever, like that's living. And again, kind of like I was saying at the beginning, is just defined by death in a way, not avoiding it, but kind of using it as a driver. And again, not in fear. Fear of death is a powerful one, but just being like, eventually I will put my head down and I won't wake up. I should use this time wisely. I should be very, very wise about that. And there's a great quote, and I'll go back and find this because it really was awesome. I shared this with the group. David and I talked about this a while back. It's from Unseen Warfare. And I may have mentioned this last week too. Spend all the hours of your life in a way pleasing to God. Keep in your mind the thought that after the present hour, you will not be given another, and that you will have to render a strict account for every minute of this present hour. Remember that the time you have in your hands is priceless, and if you waste it uselessly, the hour will come when you will seek and not find it. There will come a time when you will be out of time. That's something that Owen talks about too, is like the hour is late, that you've run out. And did you prepare properly? But not only prepare just for the sake of preparation, like I'm going to survive nuclear warfare, but like, are you prepared for this moment? Are you prepared for fatherhood? Are you prepared for survival? Are you prepared for the next generation? Job interview, for the whatever, it's of course the Boy Scout motto or slogan, be prepared. You have to take all these life experiences and you have to just say, if I were to die today, did I do everything I could have? Did I enjoy my time? Did I enjoy my time here? Not just like, playing video games or watching a movie can be a lot of fun and very restful, but there's also that excess. I played a video game for about a half hour the other day and that was enough time. I was like, all right, I got it out of my system. Like I'm good for a few days. I just needed some time to power down and just mindlessly hang out and just, it was quiet, But But after that, I was like, okay, I'm good. I had done plenty of work before. I had earned a little break, and then I worked after that, and I was happy when I went to bed. So something I'm trying to think on more and more. Like I said, that when it's that sort of 101st day, it's like, okay, let's do it. Let's use this. And you really have to adapt and improvise. That's kind of a big moment in here too, is these guys that just get faced with these moments, like Sasha gets faced with that moment where you just have to improvise, say, all right, it's here. Like the day of my death, it's come, or it's not, and I'm gonna fight that. But anyway, it was 131, kind of made me laugh. And I was talking about this earlier about the self-improvement has to go beyond the books. The author is talking about fighting this particular tabby was pushing 300 pounds himself. I wonder what the opposition looked like after he got through with him. A pasting from this chap, which I very nearly got, must have had the same effect as an extended cold shower. And that just kind of made me laugh again, the humor in this author's writing. But it made me think about how many people do the cold showers and stuff. And this is a big sentiment in the self-improvement world right now. Like everybody's making a video about how your self-improvement has to go beyond the book. And it's true. And I was kind of doing that for a while. And I think it's a good daily practice. But for some people, there is the getting past that hurdle. That first thing is like, I'm going to challenge myself. And then for me, it was training into something challenging and pushing my limits. Like I started doing a cold bath and like doing it for 1 minute, doing it for 2 minutes, doing it for 3 minutes, doing it for 3.5, and then 4, and incrementally, training towards trying to get that uncomfortability, that pushing past personal limits, that discipline, doing things we couldn't think we could do. But eventually, like, you have to graduate beyond that. You have to, once you've kind of achieved a certain level of it, it's kind of like, all right, well, I've done that thing now. Like, I'm pretty damn disciplined. I've done about everything I could do. So, and really that there's a podcast guest on Lewis Howe's podcast, is, self-improvement, productivity kind of thing. His name was James Altucher. I don't know how to pronounce that. Sorry. Where he talks about, you don't even have to be the best. You don't have to be the 1% of 1%. He's like, if you get within 10% of the top, you'll beat anybody that you'll ever meet. You will have interesting experiences. You'll be able to go to like a national championship or something, and you'll be able to compete with the best. When you get to that elite like sliver, the amount of practice it takes to become that good at something is so like, you have to be able to like sustain your life on that thing. But if you can even be, I think he talks about being in the top 10%, it's as good as being in the 1%, because you're able to compete with the best. You're able to beat anybody in your day-to-day life, or outsmart, or whatever you're looking for. But you don't have to achieve the best, because frankly, there will always be somebody better than you, unless you literally are the absolute 100% best 100% of the time. But I think that just speaks to a lot. Like, these guys were very good at several different things, and they were good enough, and those skills translated over. And I've said this before, but like, they were good enough, and not just like 50% good enough. Like, they were called on because of their skills. They survived those moments with death because of their skills, because of their practice, because of what they were good at. And they were good enough at it, even if they weren't truly a master. They were within throwing distance of mastery, and that was enough to get them through. So I think that's maybe kind of going off that self-improvement block. Like, a lot of people talk about, you need to be the master. And a friend of mine in one of my groups talks about how he wants to do things like an artisan and a craftsman. And I think that's so powerful. Doing your day-to-day stuff, or doing your passion like a craftsman, or doing your whatever it is, even looking at your finances like an artisan, and being intentional with everything you do, can be enough to make you survive, and to make you good at something, and to get you into the elite circle that you're looking for. You don't always have to be the best. In moments of death, it's probably good to be the best that you can be with your weapon and knowing your enemy and things like that. But yeah, I think eventually you kind of have to just draw the line and say, okay, I've learned everything I need to know. It's time to move on to a different skill. It's time to grow in another direction. I'm the best I can be here, without conceivably spending every waking hour of every minute. And some people are driven to do that. Some people are driven to be Olympic medalists and things like that, and by all means. But you eventually, I think you kind of have to find what type of person you are. Are you a person that likes to dabble in everything? Are you a person that likes to become super good at a few things, or do you want to become the master? Just make sure you make the right choice, And I guess it all depends on your situation. Like, is it going to keep you alive? It's probably good to be pretty good at that. So I think that's really about all I had. A lot of focus on death. I mean, that's of course it's called Death in Silent Places, but I think it's powerful that eventually you just have to like get out and hunt, and you will face death, and you will face the hardships, and you kind of have to just put pain on the backboard and live like you're dying, or not the backboard, but the back burner, and live like you're dying. So that's that. I hope you guys enjoyed the chat. Next week, yeah, it'll be next week. Should be good. Chapter 5, not really that long. I think it's about 40 pages. So less than 7 to 10 pages a day. So it's not bad at all. About 6 pages a day. So like I said, I hope you enjoy. Thanks for joining me. If you watched it live or in the replay, thanks for watching. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and go to bed. I've been talking longer than I thought I was going to. So, but I had a lot to say this time. I really enjoyed this book, and I appreciate Welding and Ms. JOATBear for suggesting it. It's been a lot of fun. So chapter 5.